Falsehood. I'm your host, Brother Daryl Muhammad.
And I'm Sister Deborah Muhammad. Welcome to the Community Defender Talk Show.
And of course, we have a very powerful show planned for you. And in keeping with the theme that we have been on, which is justice or else, we have a very powerful guest in our studios, the Southwest Regional Representative of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, our Southwest Regional Minister in the studio with us tonight. And of course, you heard from him several weeks ago by phone, but now we are blessed to have our brother in studio and in person, and we're grateful to Allah for your presence. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Now, of course, tonight's topic is justice or else, the real Dr. King. Now, Sister Deborah and I have done several shows on the misuse of King, the misuse of history to promote a false narrative to lead us in the wrong direction. But now we have with us Regional Minister Robert Muhammad, who has been studying this at the request of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan to delve deeper into this. And when you look at this, you will absolutely see that Dr. King, in his waning moments among us, was right in line with the independence that we have advocated here on the Community Defender Talk Show. And so last time you were on, we talked about that conflict mediation initiative that you have launched in 5 states. My goodness. Hold on just a second, caller. We were talking about that initiative that you had launched in 5 states where there's a mediation hotline to keep peace. Hold on just a second, caller. Just a second. Thank you. Now, and of course, we talked about that and how that was going. And I understand that that is going very, very well. And you have been talking all weekend and working all weekend on this justice or else initiative that the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is pushing for. How are things going with that initiative? And if you could just kind of fill people in on the basics of what that initiative is all about.
Well, first of all, Brother Daryl and Sister Deborah, thank you for having me on the Community Defender program. These are the people's sacred airwaves, and I don't take it lightly that I've been allowed to come on the people's airwaves to speak to the people. That being said, we're advocating justice or else. And justice is fair dealing. Justice is the antithesis of wrong, so teaches the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and it distinguishes right from wrong. So in this particular case, we cannot condemn what others are doing to us if we are in turn doing things to ourselves. And one of the things that we must do is we must mediate conflict that's happening in our community. There's a lot of things that we don't talk about that we need to talk about. Mental illness, for instance, in the black community is something like we don't talk about. We just say at the family reunion, don't go over there mess with Uncle Bubba. He's touched.
That's right.
We do things like that. We don't discuss domestic violence we should. We don't discuss incest like we should. And unfortunately, we don't have a conversation about black on black violence. We say Black Lives Matter, and they do matter. Because if you don't recognize the value of black life, you don't recognize the value of any life, since black people are the originators of human life on this planet. But that being said, we seem to only say Black Lives Matter when the police or the system or the government is killing us. We say that all black lives matter.
That's right.
Whether we take that life or whether that life is taken by others. So in this particular case, we have launched an initiative across the country and across our region in particular, but the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said we must set up conflict centers. We must now begin to mediate our differences and our disputes. So we have set up across the Southwest region beef hotlines so people can call and we can help try to at least mediate some of these conflicts that really, when you look at them, when you go sit in court and you sit and you listen to what was the root of this particular problem, if someone would have intervened early, it would not have escalated into the taking of life or some kind of serious assault.
Absolutely. Now let's go ahead to the caller. Caller, go ahead. You're on with the Community Defender.
Yes,
Go ahead, caller.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, look like to me that from the the whole thing is that we got away from our old values. The young kids today, you know, they are not got it right. Long time ago, we had people standing over us. Right now, it's like people just running loose. I mean, like some uncaged chickens, things like that. I mean, that's not right. You know, so what would we have to do in order to change some of this?
Well, if I may address that.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you very much, caller. If I may address that, if you look at the period in which you notice that, in fact, that we did get away from our values, our folkways, our mores, our norms, is the time that we began to integrate. You see, when we were forced to live among one another, we had stronger family bonds. We had stronger community bonds. And I'm not saying that segregation was the good old days. I'm simply saying that this is a fact. That when we began to go into the greater community, it was at the same time that the baby boomers began to rebel against their World War II and Korean War era parents. And then they believed in free love. They believed in the summer of love in 1968, and have sex with whomever you want to have sex with, and to take drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And it was about rebelling and burning your draft card and all of these things. And when we went into that greater integrating, we lost our own folkways, mores, values, and norms, and we haven't been able to recover. The difference between the hippies and the yippies of yesterday and the yuppies today is that they were forgiven their youthful indiscretions, but they were held against us. The disintegration of our family with the welfare system, whereby the man was forced to leave the house because if he was seen around the woman and the children when she was receiving aid to dependent children, then that would be cut off. The removal of the manufacturing base from America. First, it went from the inner city and the warehouse district to the suburbs. This is in the north and in the Rust Belt district. And then they moved the factories to the south because of the weaker environmental and labor laws. They didn't really have unions and environmental laws here that were enforced. And then the Congress was bought and sold by the corporatocracy to whereby what they did was, unfortunately, they allowed, through tax incentives, to move the factories overseas. So now you don't have jobs. We're being socially engineered. You have drugs and alcohol being dropped into our community, and we don't have black folk. In most cases, don't have a passport. So how is this drugs getting into the community? We've got high-powered weapons in our community. Remember when we used to settle our differences with fists, caller? Remember when you had a difference with little Junebug down the street? You and him would have a boxing match, and at the end of it all, you'd have a black guy and a bloody lip, but you'd shake hands and you'd go on. Not today. Today, they got high-powered rifles and weapons. Black people don't even make slingshots.
Come on,
So
now.
how are these high-powered weapons finding their way in our community? I contend that desegregation was right, but integration was wrong, because it doesn't make me smarter sitting next to someone white or going to their schools. What makes me smarter is when I learn what I'm supposed to learn, and I have my family unit intact, and I believe in God as the cornerstone of my family, because it's strong family that gives you a strong nation. And since the family's been destroyed through social engineering, we see this is why our mores have gone out the window. Let's get back to strong family. Let's get back to preservation of marriage. Let's forget this free for all. Let's stop taking drugs. Let's get all of the pharmaceutical ads off the air. Have you noticed, caller, that everywhere, it's not even McDonald's or Burger King or Jack in the Box anymore? It's always pharma. It's Cialis. It's Viagra. What are they doing? What is Big Pharma? How are we getting all this medicine on there? And yet we're not talking about the things that are helpful, such as marriage and family. I tell you, we got to get back to basics. You're right, caller, and I'm glad you raised that question. Thank you.
Well, before we leave that point, I want to ask you about education. You said about, you did mention education, and we know that this is a white supremacist system, and it's a construct. It's based on white supremacy, And when our children go into a system where they don't see themselves as important or see their value in the system, what can you speak on about re-education in terms of our children and our young people starting to see themselves in a different light?
First, let me quote Neely Fuller Jr., who said, "If you don't understand white supremacy and how it works, everything else you understand will only confuse you." So it doesn't matter whether you have a PhD, a master's degree, a BA or a BS. It all turns out to be BS if you don't understand the construct in which we operate. And so once we come to understand that 1 + 1 is 2,
Right.
when we understand, endoplasmic reticulum when it comes to biology,
Come on.
when we understand physics is the relationship between energy and matter,
Yeah.
those things are not white supremacists.
Right.
However, when you inculcate our minds with the Western values are the best and Western civilization is the best,
Right.
and then what you do is you leave out 1,000-year history of how Europe went into the Dark Ages at the fall of the
Come
Roman
on.
Empire,
Come on.
and you don't even tell your own children about the Moors that occupied Spain and Portugal that not only preserved but also advanced Western
on. That's
civilization.
right.
Because when Europe fell into the Dark Ages, dear sister, they forgot about Rome and Greece and all of that. It was Muslim scholars who went in and studied the teachings of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates. It was Muslim scholars who have tracked your stars because
Come on.
nearly 1/3 of the stars that are named are actually Arabic names.
right.
When you look at mathematics, you don't use Roman numerals to do calculus. You use Arabic numerals. Why don't you know? Where did you get that from? Do you know that you wouldn't even have rock and roll if it weren't for the Muslims? Because what would rock and roll be without a guitar? The Muslims introduced the guitar to Europe.
Yeah.
And do you know that your major white scholars that all of them look to, particularly during the Renaissance period or the Age of Enlightenment, they studied Latin texts that were translated out of Arabic, and that many of your great scholars of that time were given Latinized names,
Yes.
like Averroes was actually Ibn Rashid, and others like that. So what we have to understand is that all human beings have contributed to what is known today as Western civilization. Western civilization is not the greatest, it's only the latest. And it is actually a compilation or amalgamation of everyone else's civilizations. Where would they be? Have we been able to get to the moon? Have we not had the European not gone and seen gunpowder used in China and skyrockets? Would we been able to go to the moon without logarithms,
That's right.
without calculus,
Come on.
without these things? And when you look at the word algebra, when you look at that, they actually come from Arabic names.
Right.
So why don't we just understand that everyone has contributed to the onward march of civilization? Last point I'll make in regards to education, it doesn't take away from you to acknowledge other
That's
people's
right.
contributions.
That's right,
So
brother.
when we look at the pyramids of Egypt, Egypt is not in the Middle East. There's no such thing as the Middle East. That's a European construct that
That's
comes
right.
from the Foreign Ministry Office of Britain. They made up a thing called the Middle East. There's just the Far East,
That's
but they
right.
call it the Middle East.
Come on.
And so you
Man.
put Egypt in the so-called Middle East when
Right.
actually Egypt is on the continent of Africa. And since you can't figure out how we built the pyramids, and I do mean we built those pyramids, you can't understand that the area, the perimeter of the base is equal to 2 times the height times pi.
Right.
Or
right.
pi, or half the height of time times pi is
Right.
what gives you the perimeter of the base and how that thing lines up with the stars and
Come
with the
on.
equator of the earth. And still to this day, no Hebrews that were enslaved built the pyramids.
sir.
That's
Come on
a
now.
myth.
No slavery.
Because the truth of the matter is that that pyramid wasn't made with bricks that weren't made without straw.
Come on.
They were made out of granite blocks that they still can't figure out how they got
They
there
poured
and
it.
how they built them. And so once you figure out how we built the pyramids, then you understand our contribution to onward march of civilization, and we can all live together in peace because we'll respect one another and all of our contribution to the onward march of civilization. That's real education.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Well said, Brother Regional. Let's go ahead to our caller. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air with the community defender.
Yes, sir. Very, very enlightening program. Very powerful. Thank you so much, Sister Deborah, Brother Daryl, and Minister Muhammad. I wanted to find out, Minister Robert, you do know that Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the world. And, of course, we have tried to, Brother Daryl, bring some final call into the prison, and they are still not allowed to receive the final call. And my interpretation, as well as your interpretation, sir, would be just all the powerful information that you're giving that our brothers and sisters need so much. Thank you so much.
Well, let us look at the prison industrial complex, and let us look at what it is its purpose. It has become an industry now.
Yes.
We have become the new product, the new commodity, unfortunately, in America. And there are people who absolutely, because of these long sentences that we have been given, there are people who absolutely raise their children, put them through college, and retire off of us being sentenced to these long sentences. There are prisons being built, so there are contractors making money.
That's right.
I would just simply like to have the salt or the sugar contract for the prison, because there are people who are literally becoming millionaires
That's right.
from our pathologies and our being incarcerated. So understand that there are vested interests. There are private prisons, for instance,
That's right.
that are benefiting from our incarceration.
That's right.
So I would simply say this: education is one of the keys to rehabilitation, so that our people, once they are incarcerated and you have their attention and their time, they can be taught. This is why they don't want the final call newspaper in the jail system, because if you wake a man up, he won't come out of prison and go back again. And therefore, you have lost your fish, you have lost your commodity, you have lost your product. And what we're doing is, my job and our job, from the teaching of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, is absolutely to put everyone in law enforcement out of business.
That's right.
Because we're taught to respect the law. We're taught to respect the law of God. Therefore, respecting the law of man is very easy. And so I say to all of us, you know, if they won't let the final call in there, let's get some Bibles in there and then get us in there, and we can go in that Bible and we can show you and teach you whatever you need to know. We tell the preachers, we like to train and teach our preachers, so you can go in there, and it's not just about clapping hands and having a good time and worshiping God. It's about going into the Word of God, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has taught us, and how to get a man to get off drugs. We don't have no 12-step program. We got a one-step program. It's called Just Quit.
Absolutely.
So
Let's go
this
ahead and
is
take
this is
call.
what we offer. And yes, we want to see the final call get in there, because as the Jesus said in the scripture, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Go ahead, caller. You're on the air with the community defender.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you for having me. This is Brother Harlem. This is kind of a little off subject, but I think it's important that our people understand the contribution that our people made to this country. The first gentleman who ever gave his life for this country was a gentleman by the name of Crispus Attucks.
That's right.
They have downplayed it to the point of calling it the Boston Massacre, but it was actually the first death of the Revolutionary War.
That's right.
And the problem that I have is this country was founded in 1776. If the first president that we acknowledge is in 1789, George Washington, where is the illusion of the 12 years that we are not told about? And the importance that the Moors and free people of color who were already in control and self-governing, why can't we go back to the way that we used to be in the success, like how you discussed? We built the pyramids. We were the ones who introduced the sciences that other groups have taken credit for and pushed us to stop.
Absolutely. Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Brother Reed.
Well, it simply boils down to he's bearing witness to what I was saying, and he's only, as the young people say, he's building on what I said. And I simply don't need to elaborate or elucidate on what he just said. What he said just stands on its own, and it's what the Thomas Jefferson called one of those self-evident truths.
Yes,
What he
yes.
just said. But most people don't know about it, and that's the problem. You know, Sister Deborah, as an educator, all of our children are gifted and talented.
That's right.
All of them.
That's
Even
right.
the ones that they consider autistic. Because you can see an autistic child, they may not be able to tie their shoes.
Right.
But they're able to listen to a piano being played and go back and play that piano.
That's right.
How is that child that can't even tie his shoes able to do that? All of our children are gifted and talented. The problem is the educational system.
Yes.
Because we look at the very root of the word education, and it comes from two Latin words, which means to bring out or draw
That's
out.
right.
Bring out what? bring out the innate talent that God has already given the child. And so what happens is that the educational system is supposed to not cookie cut children, but it's supposed to look at each child, know it's an individual miracle created by God, and then bring out of that child the talent and the skill that God gave us through the womb of a woman.
That's right.
His laboratory. The woman is so precious in all of this because she is the first teacher, the first nurse. So we've got to learn to honor, respect, and protect. Going back to the first caller, to honor, respect, and protect the woman and not objectify her and make her a thing or some way that you sell cars or you sell candy bars or whatever, making her a little tart, a thing of pleasure.
Right.
But no, she has to be respected as the first teacher. And if we would pay teachers what we pay basketball players to run up and down on their court in their underwear. We just in Houston, Texas, our star, James Harden, was given a $200 million contract over 13 years for Adidas sneakers. What if we paid our teachers that? What if we honored our farmers that way?
Come on.
Then perhaps we wouldn't be as sick and obese as we
right,
are,
that's
and we wouldn't be dumb. So we're fat and dumb in America, and that's why the world is taking us by storm.
Absolutely. Now, of course, we do have a subtitle which deals with the real Dr. King. And I wanted to kind of get to that because that was something that you had touched on very hard at the town hall meeting in Baton Rouge. And you did touch on it at Muhammad Mosque number 65, that Dr. King has been kind of homogenized and processed and then given back to us in the same way that they do food. They take the natural food and then they process it and give it back to us in a way where we can't benefit from the nutrients in the food, and they do our history the same way. And you made several very, very good points about what Dr. King had actually said. Now, before we get into that, if you can, Brother Director, if we can cue up that video, which also deals with Justice or Else, that shows that us and Dr. King were on the same page, and then we'll let the regional minister do what he does with this truth.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, the other thing that we've got to come to see now that many of us didn't see too well during the last 10 years, that is that racism
not guilty
is still alive in American society and much more widespread.
Broke his neck after Baltimore police.
A handful of protesters, a handful of criminals and thugs who...
Many in moments of anger, many in moments of deep bitterness, engage in riots. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
Mr. Gray's death was a homicide.
The Negro was freed from the bondage of physical slavery.
The athletes marched onto a stage.
But at the same time, the nation refused to give him land to make that freedom meaningful. Freedom without land to cultivate. It was freedom and famine at the same time.
And create jobs for our people.
The Negro is to be free. He must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out,
Individually, we are poor when you compare us with white society in America. We are poor. Collectively, we are richer than all the nations in the world with the exception of 9. That's power right there if we know how to prove it. We begin the process of building a great economic base, and at the same time, we are putting pressure where it really hurts. We don't have to argue with anybody. We just need to go around to these stores and to these massive industries in our country. Say, God sent us by here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. We come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you're not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow. And our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. We mean business now, and we are determined to gain our rightful place in God's world.
Was produced by The Final Call, and it was produced to show the nature of what Dr. King was saying and how it's very relevant to today, and to show you that in the evolution of Dr. King, he was right where we are today in terms of doing something for ourselves and using the power of our dollars to gain the respect and the justice that we absolutely need. Now, you had mentioned, Brother Minister, that Dr. King said some things that a lot of people, when we watch the I Have a Dream speech, are unaware of, that really shine a completely different light on Dr. King. If you could elaborate on some of that and how that relates to Justice Else and the initiative of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, if you could elucidate on that for us.
Elucidate?
Yes, sir.
Enucleate, blow it up.
Yes, sir. There
okay.
you go.
Okay. Well, what we have to do is, I recommend this book. It's called I Have a Dream, The Writings and Speeches That Changed the World, and they're a compilation of Dr. Martin Luther King's speeches that he gave. And I'd like to recommend this for the simple reason for the viewing audience to get this book, because it has the I Have a Dream speech, it has other speeches that Dr. King gave, but it also has his speeches from 1966 on to the very last speech he gave, which people call the mountaintop speech, where the next day, of course, he was assassinated.
Right.
Now, the thing that people don't understand is that they often quote that speech, and they quote it in such a way, it says, I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you. So they say that the king now, the dreamer, saw his own death, and he predicted we'd get to the promised land. And we've called the promised land everything. We've called the promised land Barack Obama being elected president. We've called the promised land black people being in the NFL, being owners, being in corporate America and all that. But the promised land is just that. It's promised land. It's what God promises, and promised the children of Israel independence, and promised them the ability to care for themselves, feed, clothe, and shelter themselves, and participate fully in the society and in now this global economy. We are not players in that thing. We're just consumers. That's right. So Dr. King, in that speech, he was there. Why was he in Memphis?
Right.
Why was he there? We seem to forget it was the garbage workers' strike, okay? And Dr. King he gave a very long speech. In fact, he didn't really want to come to speak at that church that night. They said, Doc, Abernathy and them can't hold him. You need to come on over here. So he got up and he went over there and he gave this speech. But the speech that he gave was about economic withdrawal and not only boycotting, but boycotting.
That's right.
Meaning, he said, take your money out of the downtown banks and put them in Tri-State Bank, which was a black-owned bank. So Dr. King was talking at that time. What one would have to say was, in fact, what Elijah Muhammad had been teaching all along, building your own institutions. At that time, the Nation of Islam had its own bank called Guaranteed Bank there in Chicago on Stony Island. At that time, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had farms, had schools, was bringing in more frozen fish into the country than anybody. We weren't the largest black importers of fish. We were the largest importers of fish, bringing in fish by the metric tons and then shipping it across the country in our own trucks.
That's right.
And having our own cold storage and having men going out and selling that fish and supporting their families. We were selling 1 million Muhammad Speaks newspapers per issue at that time. You had bakeries, we had cleaners, we had an aviation company. We had all of these things going on. These are things people don't know about the Nation of Islam. When you look at what Dr. King was talking about, that's exactly where he was going.
That's it.
And these two great men of Georgia would have met up, the master teacher and the master orator.
Come on.
Would have came together and they would have set America on fire. But they killed Dr. King because they knew if they'd have killed Elijah Muhammad, they knew there'd have been a revolution in this country. And when they killed Dr. King, there almost was a revolution in this country.
That's right.
So imagine if the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would have rose up. But no, they killed him not because he was a dreamer, because he woke up from the dream. Look at what he said here. This is coming out of I See the Promised Land, and it says here, we don't have to argue with anybody. It's Dr. King speaking. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to these stores and to these massive industries in our country and say, God sent us by here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. And we've come here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you're not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow. And our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. And then he goes on to say, and so, as a result of this, we're asking you tonight. Now, Dr. King's talking to there's a raging thunderstorm going on outside in Memphis.
That's right.
But he's talking to the audience right there. And you know, a Baptist preacher get him at fever pitch. And he says, and so, as a result of this, we're asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Coca-Cola, for God's sake. You can't get more American than that.
Right.
Come on.
Then he goes on saying, go by and tell them not to buy seal test milk. Tell them not to buy, what is that other bread? Wonder Bread.
Right.
And what is that other bread company, Jesse? He's talking about Jesse Jackson here. Tell them not to buy Heart's bread. As Jesse has said, up to now, only the garbage men have been feeling the pain. We must now kind of redistribute the pain.
Come on.
He goes on to say, but not only that, we've got to strengthen black institutions. I call upon you to take your money out of the banks downtown and deposit your money in Tri-State Bank. We want a banking movement in Memphis.
That's it.
So where was this dreamer? You see, they have taken Dr. King and frozen him in 1963.
That's what they did.
And every Dr. Martin Luther King birthday celebration and every Black History Month, they have our poor little children out there, and all they do is they give him the Dr. Martin Luther King I Have a Dream 1963 March speech. But I'm saying to the parents out there, this Dr. Martin Luther King holiday and this Black History Month, tell your children's teacher, no, I don't really want him to recite I Have a Dream. Dr. King was broader and deeper than that. Why don't you have him to give the speech he gave April 4th, 1967, calling Breaking the Silence, why I opposed the Vietnam War?
Come on.
Why don't you have him recite Black Power Defined? Why don't you have him recite passages from the Drum Major's Instinct? Why don't you have him recite passages from Where Do We Go From Here, Community of Chaos? Why don't you have him recite some of the passages I've just read out of I've Seen the Promised Land speech in Dr. King's writings? It is because, brothers and sisters, if you do that, if you really sit down and you listen, even go on YouTube and listen to Dr. King's speeches, where we got many of these clips, you'll find out that you and I have been, as Malcolm said, bamboozled, hoodwinked, and we've been took. Our man, now we're claiming back and taking back Dr. King. I know it seems strange for Nation of Islam to be talking about Dr. King, But you know something? The more I grow and the more I mature,
Right.
the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has asked us to study our brother.
That's
And as you
right.
begin to study our brother, you begin to understand why they killed him. And as I grow and I appreciate and I love him for what the man he was evolving to. And I'm growing to understand that we're going to have to take care of the unfinished business that Dr. King had
That's right.
on that day when he was assassinated, April 4th, 1968. In fact, he was heading up a poor people's campaign. And ironically, he was going to Washington, D.C. with people of all creeds, classes, and colors, just as we're going back to Washington, D.C. on 10/10
That's right.
for justice or else.
Isn't that something?
Which brings us to, what is the minister going to be speaking about on that day? I think he rolled out something that he wanted to speak about, which goes in line with Dr. King's.
You know, Dr. King was not only a prolific orator, he was a great writer. And he wrote out many of his speeches. And those notes that were on his dresser in the Lorraine Hotel is a speech that he was giving, why America might go to hell. And he never got to give that speech. Well, we have copies of those notes. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said if God willing, he's going to give the speech that Dr. King never gave. He's going to give that speech. As I said before, it's unfinished business. And we got unfinished business. We're going to take Dr. King, we're going to take Malcolm, we're going to take Rosa Parks, we're going to take Fannie Lou Hamer, where they're all going to be the wind at our backs. And we're going to get justice for all in this country, regardless of creed, class, or color. And I know this might surprise some of the viewers that the Nation of Islam, the quote-unquote black Muslims, would take this mantle. But who else? Who else but the despised and rejected that God would take? Who else but the bottom rail would God raise to the top? Who else would take a people who have been considered foolish people and take them and confound the wise with the wisdom? This isn't my wisdom. I'm not smart. I may have the gift of gab. But what I'm reciting to you are the teachings of Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the great example before us, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And as the rap group Public Enemy says, don't tell me that you understand until you hear the man for yourself.
Come on.
Absolutely. Now, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan has talked about this holiday called Christmas. And he has outlined Christmas and the spending that we as a people do in Christmas as a target for change. If you, go ahead, ma'am.
Before you go to that point, I want to ask two questions on this point. What does real justice look like, and what does the or else mean?
Real justice looks like land. 40 acres and a mule. Now, they can keep the mule and give us some tractors. But we were promised 40 acres. If we would have got our 40 acres, we wouldn't be in the condition that we're in right now. Land is the basis of freedom. Now what God hates more than anything, according to our faith tradition, is ingratitude.
Man.
You see? So it's ingratitude. So here are people who have been, again, we go back to education, Sister Deborah,
Yes,
who have been brainwashed to believe that they pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps.
Right.
That somehow they got here just through their own hard work and labor, that all of a sudden that's how they built this great country. No, they built this great country from stealing the land from the Indians and going to Africa and getting us to come work the land.
Come on.
They got 1/3 of the United States. In fact, they got Louisiana and 1/3 of the United States landmass in the lower 48. Because the Haitians defeated the French in 1804, and the French cashed out of this hemisphere and sold America this piece of land called the Louisiana Purchase. So now, when we look at that, my dear sister, we find ourselves where European immigrants came here from Eastern Europe, and they were given, through the Homestead Acts and through the Land Grant Acts, they were given, Warrell Acts they were called, the Warrell Acts, they were given 250 million acres of land. 250 million acres of land.
To white immigrants.
To white immigrants, European immigrants, of course. And we were excluded from the labor unions. When you look at the history of Samuel Gompers, he was a racist. He hated Chinese and black people. At the turn of the last century, if you found a white man with a hammer in his hand, he would draw a crowd because we were in control of all the trades. We built the governor's mansions. We were the slave labor that was loaned out to build the White
That's
House
right,
and
that's
that
right.
built the capital of the United States.
That's right, that's right.
We are the skilled artisans that built all of the beautiful architecture that you have here in the South. So if you seen a white man swinging a hammer, he would draw a crowd. But you know, Samuel Gompers said he wanted to make it so that you would never see the N word would ever have a tool in his hand again.
Come on.
So they excluded us from the labor unions at the beginning of it. The AFL and the CIO, all that excluded us in the beginning. And they also boycotted the Chinese on the West Coast. So now, you look at it. So you haven't given us the 40 acres that we were promised. You excluded us from the skilled trades. And now what have you left for us? You left us to be domestic workers and the workers sharecroppers, right?
That's right.
Then when they go fast forward to when when Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed Social Security, they excluded, listen to this, they let everybody in the Social Security except for domestic workers and farm workers.
Wow.
That's where we were. So even Social Security was racist. We have been cut out of this whole society and the ability to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps because, hell, they didn't even give us any boots. So now, what does justice look like? Justice looks like what the scripture says, let no man deceive you. God shall not be mocked. He said, whatsoever a man soweth, the same shall he reap.
That's right.
And so what we've got to understand is that you've stolen our labor, you've stolen the Indians' land, and you have not ever given us justice. Welfare check is not justice.
No, it's not.
It's not justice. Miseducation is not justice.
No, sir.
That's not justice. Justice is what your forefathers got when they came here. That's real justice. But short of that is to give us equal justice under the law. The law applied equally regardless of creed, class, or color. That's what justice looks like.
Yes,
What
sir.
is the or else? The or else is this. We get $1.3 trillion out this economy. You know something? Christmas is coming up. I say to my Christian brothers and sisters, put Christ back into Christmas.
Right.
Because I don't know where this fat man from the North Pole, Santa Claus, comes from that has kicked your Jesus to the curb.
Think about it.
What about it? I know they're going to get upset. You Muslims talking about Jesus. Wait a minute, we love Jesus.
That's right.
We love him so much, we're not going to let you mix in paganism with
Come
that.
on.
When Constantine became Caesar of Rome, and he became the Caesar of both the East and the West, what he did was, when he was so-called converted to Christianity, he did not get rid of his sun worship in pagan ways. He just amalgamated the two. I ask you to go to the 10th chapter of Jeremiah and read where God is ordering through Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. And God knows that God's prophets and messengers are weeping and seeing what we do every so-called Christmas in the name of Jesus. What does the Christmas tree got to do with Jesus? What does the holly wreath got to do with Jesus? What does the Yule log have to do with Jesus? What does the candle being burnt in your window got to do with Jesus? What does the ball on those trees got to do with Jesus? What does Santa Claus got to do with Jesus? Nothing. Nothing at all.
You mean Rudolph doesn't have anything?
Rudolph has nothing. With his reindeer, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, I think he was drunk, and that's what it was. But anyway, regardless, it has nothing to do with Jesus. And so what do? There are people who don't even believe in Jesus. At least as Muslims, we believe in Jesus. They don't even believe in Jesus, but they're benefiting from Christmas. They say on December 26th, thank God for Jesus. And they don't even believe in Jesus as they count. Or they count up all of their money. All their money. They don't believe in Jesus is who they are. They don't believe in Jesus. That's who they are.
The people that don't believe.
They don't believe in Jesus. In fact, there are people that in their religious texts say that Jesus is in hell boiling in excrement. That's what they say about him. And that his mother was a unchaste, a whore. That's what they say in their holy books.
But we give them all their money.
Yeah, but we give them all our money. You figured out who I'm talking about. Right. I'm being a little circumspect because I don't want people to lose track of what I'm about to say. You cannot demand justice. You cannot protest against police killings. You cannot protest against the government cutbacks and all the things that they're doing with voter ID laws and all of the things they're doing to cut and our benefits and our rights as citizens, so-called citizens in this country. And then I look up on TV and I see you beating somebody down or getting run over on television trying to get in Best Buy or Walmart to buy a flat screen that's on sale on the day after Thanksgiving. You look like a clown. The whole world is laughing at us because they know that they have bamboozled us because they make their profit off of us in those days between Thanksgiving and Christmas. If Christmas is a celebration of Jesus the Christ, then why don't you, brothers and sisters, forget about the tree this year. Forget about buying gifts this year. Why don't you celebrate this Messiah Savior that was born to reconcile God to man and man back to God again? One who is, his blood was shed for the forgiveness of our sins, for remission of our sins. How come you can't forgive Junebug? You've been mad at him since he stole Big Mama's ring. Why can't you forgive? Why can't you forgive Aisha? Yeah, I know you got mad because she got pregnant out of wedlock and you were falling out with her years ago. Why is it that you can't just gather the family around the table, no gifts, no presents, and forget about drinking liquor? Oh my God, you drink more liquor on Jesus' birthday than the law allows. More DWIs, more accidents during Jesus' birthday because you're drunk and liquored up. They got more sobriety stops during Jesus' birthday than they do any other time. This is how you celebrate a man of God? So, brothers and sisters, withdraw your economics on that day. Go around the table and love and hug and forgive one another. Talk about this great man called Jesus and what he means to your family. And don't let the commercial merchants of lies and filth and debauchery take your money. Put your money in your pocket. And if you got to go shop, wait till the first of the year. That's when the sales happen anyway, because they have to take inventory and they have to pay taxes on that inventory. And so they will give it to you at the real price that it is. Have you ever noticed on December 26th, all the way through January 1st, there's 80% sale. They're 80% off. That's right. Come right down here, 80% off. Well, how are you getting 80% off? You mean to say that's what it really cost in the beginning? So you were suckering me. You were suckering me when you said it was a 20% sale. Now it's an 80% sale. So if I add the 20 and the 80 together, that was 100% markdown now. Sisters and brothers, again, we have been used, and we got to stop and use it. The RLs automatically puts them, them people, they're going to rise up, they're going to burn something, they're going to do all this. Brothers and sisters, we just got to stop spending money with them because actually money is their God.
Come on.
That's actually correct right there. That's what it is. I will say this, and you pretty much hit on the question that I was going to get to, and that is we need to begin our economic withdrawal during this December the 25th season. We don't need to withdraw our families, but we need to begin our economic withdrawal or withdrawing support at that time, so that the enemies of our people will begin to feel that pain in such a way that they'll take notice. And the point that you made, which I thought was so eloquent, was that we are a people that blame white people for 99% of our problems, but we spend 97% of our money with white people. And you were just talking about how that's totally unsustainable, and how it really makes our people just look more and more foolish every day. And that point really resonated with me that you made on yesterday at that town hall meeting. And I would just hope that the viewing audience would look at that and understand that you are not defined by what you spend or how much your TV costs, and to be in line for a shoe that costs $10 to make and is $200, and people being literally shot. I mean, in Chicago, they found a man with 6 bullet holes in it with no shoes on.
Right.
I mean, so you taking a human life for some shoes.
A video game.
A video game or whatever it may be. And those kinds of things are what we really have to get away from, in the balance that we bring to our people. Now, in the remaining moments that we have on the program, of course, I want to thank our regional minister, Brother Minister Robert Muhammad, for coming, and as I guess a younger member of the Nation of Islam, we all, my whole family, really came up under this brother's leadership.
That's right.
As well as the leadership of our local minister, Minister Abdul Rashid Muhammad, who really helped to found the mosque that we all came in. but we all came up in this region under your voice to a large extent. Now I want to mention this. Victor White Sr., who is the father of Victor White III, is going to have a march and rally October the 17th in New Iberia, Louisiana. That's the message that we received. It's a call to action, and it's going to be on at the corner of Main Street and Jefferson Street in New Iberia at 11 o'clock, October the 17th, which will be 1 week after the Justice or Else gathering in Washington, D.C., headed by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So I wanted to mention that, and of course, Victor White Sr. has been on our program quite a few times, and he was at our town hall meeting, and he is right with us in the Justice or Else cause. So all of our family in the Iberia Parish area that are watching, make sure that you support that march and support our brother, because the same struggle that is going on in Ferguson is going on in Lafayette, is going on in New Orleans, it's going on everywhere. We are all dealing with the same thing. And of course, I wanted to thank you, Brother Regional.
We have to make sure that the viewers know justiceorelse.com. Go on there and register and get emails and updates. You can get your Android phone and your Apple phone apps downloaded, and also make a small donation to Justice or Else. That's the reason why we're able to speak the way we speak, is because we fund our own freedom. So $1 or $5 or $20 will help towards that. If we all will give a little, we can all do a lot. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, and of course, we definitely thank you for being on our program, and we're going to be coming right back at you with another installment of the Community Defender. Stay tuned, keep moving, justiceorelse.com, and we're going to ride this thing out together as a people under the divine voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and those who are with him in 2015 and beyond. I want to thank you, and of course, how many seconds we got? We're just about out?
Yeah, just about.
Just keep reading, keep studying, and we'll be right back at you with another installment.
And all roads lead to Washington, D.C., 10-10-15.
Absolutely.